Dungeons and Dragons players and DMs of Reddit, what's your best okay, I'll allow it story? Even more stories. Part 1 is linked in the description in case you missed it. Please check it out after if you enjoy this. Not a DM, just witness to godtail levels of luck. My buddies and I play a Fallout D&D campaign and we have 2 different campaigns going right now. At the very start of the second one, we woke up in a rundown factory. We encountered a sentry knot that was not hostile unless we entered a certain room. My buddy decided that he wanted to hack the bot to turn into a companion. Our DM said he needed to roll intelligence, science, and repair. Natural 20s for all 3 and we pretty much broke the campaign because the sentry bot deals fucking insane damage. On our first D&D session ever, one of our buddies asked our more experienced DM if he could be 4 detective penguins stacked on top of each other wearing a trench coat, each with differing abilities that you could swap between every turn depending on the penguin who was on top. Each one also happened to be named after the penguins of Madagascar. Our DM was more than happy to allow it. My players were just starting their adventure, so they were maybe level 2 at most when this happened. They were doing a dungeon I had designed to be revisited many times in the story, and as usual, these idiots unintentionally got into one of the much more dangerous higher level areas I had planned for months down the road. There's a huge underground lake inside this dungeon with something nasty, and completely optional, in its depths. They spend like a week in game on one little shore near the lake camping and preparing and planning. One of the 2 fighters had taken mostly crafting skills and ends up building a boat, while the other much more reckless fighter is climbing cave walls like a lunatic trying to do god knows what. The druid starts filling the boat with any kind of poison and flammable he can get his hands on, and they send it out to the middle of this lake. The sork lights it on fire and the batchet fighter is at the top of the cave knocking down stalactites. Long story short, these assholes killed a goddamned 6k HP kraken with a flaming poisonous boat. At level 2. My cousin joined our group for a single session. We set him up with a solid character for his one-shot adventure, figured the group would enjoy traveling with a generous, heavily armed veteran. He ends up wrestling a hostile wizard to the ground. He had thought to negate the spellcasting by tackling him, all in all not a terrible idea. His grapple checks went better than expected and he decides he can end the fight himself, so he says I pull out my garrote and strangle the fool. I remember his character sheet fairly well. I wrote the damn thing. Where did you find a garrote? You said yourself this character came with a brand new robe of useful things. A garrote is a useful thing, ergo I have one. Okay, I will allow it. Was a player in a campaign where we managed to acquire a bag of holding. My character was the one carrying said bag, and I quickly got into the habit of asking the DM, does it fit in the bag of holding? About pretty much every single thing we found. Weapons, armor, interesting furniture, statues. If it caught my eye in any way, I inquired as to fitting it into the bag of holding. Eventually we had to get to an island in a lake, so we found a rowboat and rowed across. After getting to the island, my character looked at the rowboat and, of course, asked if it would fit in the bag of holding. The DM, a little exasperated with me at his point, said something along the lines of, you know what? Sure. The damn boat fits in the bag of holding. It shouldn't, but it does. You now have a boat in a bag. Congratulations. At this time I had precisely 0 plans for the boat, but since the DM said it would fit, into the bag it went. Then we started exploring the tomb on the island. That was the whole reason for the boat ride in the first place. The DM was annoyed with all of us because we kept, deliberately, if I'm being honest, derailing the main story and trying to go in every direction except the one we needed to, so he set up one room in the tomb to be our punishment. We got to the entrance of the room and our rogue checked for traps. He rolled pretty high. The DM then gleefully described to us how the walls were covered with holes, and since the rogue had rolled well enough he could tell they were arrow traps. Literally hundreds of arrow traps, lining every inch of every wall in the room. It would probably have taken the rest of the session just for the rogue to roll all the disable trap checks. We wanted to clear the entire tomb and the only path forward was through that room. We had spent a few minutes debating how we could get past this bit of DM sadism when I had an idea. I looked at the DM and said, he pulls the rowboat out of the bag of holding. The DM, and the rest of the party gave me their best "what the fuck are you doing" stares. She turns the boat upside down, continued staring. She climbs underneath the boat. The DM sighed heavily and dropped his face into his hands as the party all huddled together and just walked through the arrow trap room under the rowboat, shielded from the DM's traps by the very thing the DM had allowed me to put in the bag of holding. In another campaign I rolled a crit that made the same DM so salty that he instituted a house rule to prevent it from happening again. I miss that gaming group. It was a lot of fun. Witcher DnD found a water hag guarding a chest of heirlooms and wearing some we were to recover. Through various hints and lore I ended up voicing my concern that the water hag may have been the wife of the man who sent us to recover it, considering she died and they couldn't even find her body. My DM looked at her notes, put some papers away and motioned for us to go on. The whole encounter was supposed to be an epic fight, but we managed to break through to her reason, have an emotional conversation, and end her life quickly when she asked us to. Spoke to her ghost as well and promised to pass on her love to her husband and son. A few lucky rolls and some creativity, and we had one of the best encounters of our campaign. This was probably 10 years ago, so details are a wee bit fuzzy. We were playing a campaign as a group of friends for the first time, with a couple of new players. As we build our characters, one of our friends decides she's going to play as a halfling. She decided that as part of the standard kit, she had a bucket and rope, so she spent all her money having spikes added to the bucket and tying the rope onto it. A boat, a grappling hook, a drinking, bathing vessel, a flail, a helmet, an elevator. It was all these things, and possibly more. It was literally her multi-tool in the campaign, and became a huge joke of how she was going to use the bucket in any difficult situation. It was a ton of fun. The DM let it go, but he had to do some hard figuring to determine its characteristics and roles and all that. And then he killed us all. Not right away, but after many sessions, when one of our friends led us down a path he didn't want us to go down, and we kept finding ways through his challenges. I only just got back into DnD, allowing me to play the character in the first place. He was a half-ogre fighter who was raised by an order of paladins. He believed he was also a paladin, so much it manifested in some very limited psionic abilities. Cellular adjustment for laying on hands, aura alteration so he always read as lawful good paladin, etc, etc. His war steed was an ox. His squire was a kobold he just went along to steal treasure. He was so dumb he once got a ring of flying and couldn't figure out how to get down. I once allowed the rogue to land the killing blow and flawlessly skin a displacer beast in one fluid motion because of his insane dice rolls. He kept it as a trophy and had it laying in front of his bed like a rug. It still occasionally disappeared for humor. Well, one morning someone set up traps in everyone's rooms in the inn they worked out of. His displacer skin rug just happened to disappear and revealed a one set for him, again due to insane dice rolls. Testing out my new Eldritch Knight, backed up against a wall by a wight, heard the harpy land on the wall above and behind me. And I'd been rolling badly all night. If I roll a 20, can I hit them both with my flail? DM snickers. Sure. Natalie. Wight dead. Harpy grappled me from behind and I ended up crushing her between me and the wall. Thanks, ridiculously ornate armor I stole off a vampire. Had a few good rounds as a PC where I managed to convince my DM to let me carry a full-size door around with me just in case we used it to escape down a hill via tobogganing and crashed into a lake away from the goblin horde chasing after us. Had another PC who had enchanted everlasting chalk convince the DM that he, the character who left the table, gave it to me. Came in handy when we entered an enchanted maze that seemed to be spiraling in a downward. Wasn't until the chalk lines lining up that we realized we were stuck in an enchantment loop. I was playing as a monk and I decided a part of the character would be to try to convert other characters into monks as often as possible. The party had entered a cave and the DM had a horde of 5 goblins attack us. My character knew goblin as a language, along with orc, since I thought it would be funny to have my character know those languages, and I told the DM I wanted to try convincing the goblins to become monks. He allowed it and I rolled a nat 20, so what was supposed to be one of the 2 main fights for that session ended up just making it so we had a small army of goblin monks for the rest of the session. In the process 2 died and the DM not wanting to deal with me having 5 turns per fight, myself, a bandit I had already made into a monk in the previous session, and the 3 surviving goblins, forced me to drop them off at a monastery so they could properly train as monks. Pathfinder player here. The spell Aboleth Lung allows you to breathe underwater. It removes your ability to breathe air. Basically, you respirate like a fish. You need water. Big bad evil guy fight. I am a mostly useless druid, but I have this spell prepared. It's not a combat spell, but what the hell? I ask the DM. He says I'll need to be able to meet big bad evil guy's touch AC for it to work. Nat 20. What was supposed to be a huge, difficult fight ended very abruptly. We looted the room and carried on to better things. Edit. Here's a bonus story that went the other way hilariously. Our rogue had taken the river rat feat, so he was supposed to be a great swimmer. He made no secret of it either. So we got to a moat somewhere that required a skill check. We all made it through, but our rogue rolled 3 fucking critical fails in a row and almost drowns. It was awesome. My favorite experience was when our group was trapped in a library with a quicksand carpet that was slowly sinking everything in the room and we needed to get to the door on the other side of the room. One member of our group was a halfling, and I was a human cleric. I asked my DM if I could throw the halfling across the room to the door. I passed the roll and just yeeted a halfling to safety. The party I DM'd for stumbled upon a small trading town with not much more than a handful of basic adventuring shops. They walked into the blacksmith shop and, upon discovering that the blacksmith had a large St. Bernard sitting by the doorstep, they offered to buy the dog, but the shop owner wouldn't budge. They went next door to the town's potions and magical item vendor, who, for the right amount of gold, could craft various kinds of potions for various kinds of things. I, being a naive and eye-expecting DM, thought nothing of the party unanimously asking for a potion of great growth and red hue, assuming it was so that they could cause a distraction later on in a cave or use it on themselves to appear as a war god of some kind. They went back to the blacksmith's house in the middle of the night, kicking down the door and cutting the blacksmith's throat. At this point, I don't mind the chaos, I'm just curious as to what happens next. They kidnap the dog and use some magic abilities they had picked up to calm it down enough to drink the potion. The dog began growing rapidly in size as the house slowly expanded, bursting at the thatch and mud seams, when suddenly, the party erupted from within on the back of a monstrous-sized dog, spewing crossbow bolts and projectile spells at the local orc tribe. Thus is the story of how Clifford the Big Red Battle Dog was born. TLDR, the party went gallivanting, stole a dog, force-fed it a potion, and continued through the adventure on the back of Clifford the Big Red Battle Dog. There was a dude who was new to the campaign but was already on everyone's nerves within an hour. Everyone was mid-level with decent gear. He was playing one of those half-dragons. Don't remember what class. Iniho, a dragon is flying toward the town and one player rolls the right dice to detect information about it, which was like the second from the top age and size category if memory serves. I had originally intended for the dragon to make a few passes on the town and then fly back to his cave where they could spelunk later and have a full adventure with the constant loom of imminent fiery death. This guy says he is going to morph into his dragon form and fly straight into the dragon's mouth. I seriously thought he was joking, so I just smiled and he sat there waiting. I said, "You know that's probably a very bad idea, right?" He said something about how he is made of dragon scales and he can get inside the mouth and claw his way to the brain. I indicate that this is probably not going to work out. I figured the speed out of the dragon, asked him his flight speed, combined the two speeds and figured out the damage using fall distance. Crude but effective. I had to borrow d6s from a few people and just rolled 2 heaping fists of d6 on the table. He looked at me with a smirk and disbelief and started nearly shouting at me without asking how I came up with that damage. Dragon skin and whatever nonsense was coming out of his mouth. I showed him my memo pad with the calculations and he just grabbed his stuff and left without a tiny bit of discussion. If he had dropped his behavior to something not so cocky and entitled, I'd have wound back time just to give him a second or third chance. His girlfriend actually stayed there for the rest of the evening, which I thought was the best part.